My child, I need to tell you what I saw. Not what someone reported to me, not what was brought to my attention. What I personally witnessed when you helped that person, the one who appeared to need the kind of help anyone could give. The one who did not look like they were carrying anything significant. The one you offered your time to, your attention to, your care to, without pausing first to calculate whether the offering made strategic sense. I was there. I saw the full moment. I saw what was behind your eyes when you made the choice to stop. I saw what was in your hands when you extended them. I saw what was in your spirit when you gave something that cost you without any expectation of seeing the cost returned. And what I want to tell you is this. What you gave was not as small as it appeared. What you gave landed somewhere that you do not yet have full visibility into, and the one receiving it was not who they appeared to be in the moment. I will explain all of this. But first I need you to sit with the fact that I was present in that encounter in a way that was not visible to you at the time. I was not simply watching from a distance. I was inside the moment with you, and what I witnessed did not go unrecorded. It went into something that cannot be reversed, and cannot be taken back, and is now producing a response that is moving toward your life with the full weight of what I am able to release in response to what you did. My child, I also want to acknowledge something about the season you have been in, because you did not help that person from a place of surplus. You did not give from a position of having more than you needed and deciding to share the excess. You were in the middle of your own season of questions, your own period of waiting, your own stretch of holding things in the invisible that had not yet become visible in the natural. The help you gave was not the generosity of someone who has arrived. It was the generosity of someone who is still in transit, still between what was promised and what has manifested, still holding faith in one hand and uncertainty in the other. That context matters to me, because generosity offered from overflow is one kind of generosity, but generosity offered from the place of not quite enough, while still carrying your own unanswered questions and your own unresolved season, is a different quality entirely. It is the widow's offering. It is the kind that I look at differently from all the other kinds. It is the kind that enters a different level of the economy I described to you through the principle in Matthew 25. And it is the kind that you gave, without thinking about it as extraordinary, without framing it that way in your own interior, without understanding that what you were doing from the place of not quite enough was the specific quality of giving that carries the most weight in the dimension I see most clearly. You may not even remember the specific moment I am speaking about. That is part of what I want to address, because the encounters that carry the most weight in my sight are often the ones that the person involved forgets first. The ones that felt ordinary from the inside because you were not tracking them. You were not aware that anything significant was happening. You were simply being who you are when no one is watching. And that is precisely why it registered the way it did. If you had known the full significance of the moment, the act would have been contaminated by that knowledge. The purity of what you gave came directly from the fact that you gave it without knowing what it meant in the larger architecture of what I was building. You did not help because you understood the weight of what was being asked. You helped because helping is what your spirit reaches toward naturally when it encounters someone who needs something you have. That is not a small thing. That is the specific quality I look for in the person I am preparing to receive something significant back. Not the person who gives strategically, not the person who evaluates the return before extending the hand. The person who gives because giving is what they are made to do, even when no one is watching, and even when there is no visible reason to expect the giving to produce anything at all. Type I gave with nothing left in the comments. My child, I want to describe what the act looked like from where I stand, because from inside the moment, it looked like a small thing. From where I stand, it looked like something that does not happen as often as people assume when they speak, in general terms, about kindness and generosity. What made it unusual was not the size of what you gave. It was the condition under which you gave it. You were not at full capacity in that season. You were not giving from overflow. You were giving from a place that did not have an obvious surplus to spare. You had been carrying your own weight, your own uncertainty, your own unanswered questions about your own season. And in the middle of all of that, you encountered someone whose need was visible to you, and you made a choice that most people do not make when they are in the condition you were in. You gave anyway. You set aside the calculation of whether you could afford to give and gave, because the person in front of you needed what you had to offer. That specific choice, the choice to give from a place of not quite enough, rather than waiting until you had enough to spare before you started giving, is rarer than I can communicate to you in language alone. It is the quality that separates the genuinely generous from the strategically generous. And what I saw in you in that moment was genuine generosity, the kind that does not wait for the conditions to be favorable before it acts, the kind that gives because giving is an expression of who the person is, rather than a calculation about what the giving will produce. And here is the other dimension of what made it register the way it did. There was no audience for it. You were not giving in a context where giving was visible to people whose approval you wanted. There was no one watching whose opinion of you would have been shaped by the act. There was no social benefit available from the giving. It was a quiet moment between you and a person who needed something, and you who had something to offer. And in the absence of any external reward for giving, you gave. That absence of external reward is not a small detail. It is the detail that determines whether what I witnessed was genuine or performed. Performance requires an audience. What you did had no audience except me, and I count. Type I move when no one watches in the comments. My child, I want to tell you now about who was in that moment with you, about who the person you helped was carrying more than they showed, because here is what you did not know when you made the choice to stop and help. That person was not simply a person in need of what you had to offer. They were carrying something in the spiritual realm that is not visible to the natural eye. As it is written in Hebrews 13:2, do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by so doing some people have shown hospitality to angels without knowing it. My child, I want you to understand the weight of that verse, not as a pleasant thought about the possibility of divine encounters, as a living principle that was active in the moment you experienced. The spiritual world does not operate with the same categories of significance that the visible world uses to sort encounters into important and unimportant. An encounter that appears ordinary by every visible measure can be the site of something that has been arranged in the spiritual realm with specific purpose, and the person who appears to be carrying the least is sometimes the person carrying the most in the dimension that cannot be seen. You did not help someone who appeared to be carrying weight. You helped someone who appeared to need what you had, but appearances in the spiritual realm are not always what they seem in the natural, and what I placed in that encounter, what I arranged to be present in that moment, was more than what was visible to you when you stopped and chose to give. As it is written in Matthew 25:40, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these my brothers and sisters, you did for me, my child. That verse is not poetry. It is architecture. It is the description of how I have structured the spiritual economy of kindness. When you give to the one who appears to have nothing, you are not simply giving to a person in need, you are giving to me. I receive it as given to me, I account for it as given to me, and I respond to it as given to me, which means the question of what you will receive in return is not determined by the capacity of the person you help to give back. It is determined by my capacity to give back, and my capacity is not limited by what the visible situation appeared to offer. You were not investing in a human relationship with a limited return. You were investing in me, and I do not receive without responding. I do not take without giving back. I do not accept what was offered to me in the form of your kindness to the person in that encounter without releasing something in response that is proportional to my nature rather than proportional to the visible size. The moment. Type I did not count the cost in the comments. Sow a seed right now for the one who gave when they did not know who they were giving to, who stopped when they did not have to stop, who offered something in a moment that had no visible audience and no visible return. Visit the link in the description below or scan the QR code on your screen. Sow it in the knowledge that what was given to the least of these was given to God, and God does not receive without responding. My child, I want to tell you what happened in the spiritual realm after you walked away from that encounter, because you walked away without knowing that anything significant had occurred. You went back to your day, back to the questions you were carrying, back to the uncertainty of your own season, and the encounter settled into the background of your memory as one of the ordinary moments of an ordinary day. But in the spiritual realm, the moment you walked away from was not ordinary. Something had been witnessed, and something had been recorded that could not be unrecorded. And there was someone in the spiritual realm whose specific assignment was to examine what you had done and determine whether it was what it appeared to be. The one whose role it is to search for the hidden motive, the self-interest concealed behind the generosity, the calculation disguised as spontaneous giving. That examination happened. I want you to know about the result of it, because the result of that examination is one of the most important things I can tell you about what you carry and what is about to be released into your life. The examination was thorough. Every dimension of what motivated the act was reviewed. The question was not just what you did, but why. And the why was examined at every level. Was there an audience? There was no audience. Was there a social benefit available? There was no social benefit. Was there a calculation about the return? There was no calculation. Was there a condition attached to the giving? There was no condition. Was there any dimension of self-interest operating beneath the surface of the generous action? There was none. The one assigned to find the flaw in what you offered looked through the full record of that moment and came back with nothing. There was nothing to present against you, nothing to use as evidence that what appeared to be pure giving was actually something else underneath. The kindness was not strategic. It was not performed. It was not calculated. It was what it appeared to be, and what it appeared to be was genuine. And genuine, uncalculated, unperformed kindness, given without an audience to the one who appeared to have nothing, is extremely rare. It is the specific quality that moves me to respond in ways that the person who gave it was not expecting. Type, "He found nothing selfish in me" in the comments. My child, I want to speak now about the people who passed that same encounter by and made a different choice, because you were not the only one who had the opportunity. The moment did not present itself to you alone. There were others who came close enough to the same situation to have made the same choice you made, and chose differently. Some of them did not stop because they calculated quickly that stopping would cost them something they were not willing to pay: time, energy, the portion of their resources they were saving for something they considered more important. Some of them looked at the person who needed help and made an assessment of what the person could offer back. And when the assessment came back with nothing, they kept moving. Some of them told themselves a story about why stopping was not their responsibility, about why someone else would come along, about why the situation was not as significant as it appeared. And some of them made the calculation I see very often, the most common one, the one that sounds most reasonable from the inside. They told themselves they would help next time, when the conditions were better, when they had more to spare, when the moment was more convenient, and they moved on. I want you to understand what I saw and the difference between their choice and yours. They were not necessarily worse people. They were people who had trained themselves, through many small decisions across many ordinary moments, to pass through the world filtering their giving through the question of what the giving would produce for them. And that filter, applied consistently enough, creates a kind of spiritual dryness, a poverty of the interior that has nothing to do with what they possess in the visible dimension, and everything to do with what they are producing in the one that cannot be seen. You have not trained yourself that way. You still give when the filter would say not to. You still stop when the calculation would say to keep moving. And what I want to tell you is that the people who kept moving that day are still carrying what they kept, and what they kept has not grown. It has not multiplied. It has not opened a door that was closed or produced a response from me that changed the trajectory of what their life is becoming. They held on to what they had and it remained what it was. You gave what you had and it went into something that is now producing a return that is not proportional to the size of what you gave, but to the nature of what I received when you gave it. As it is written in Proverbs 19:17, "Whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will reward them for what they have done." My child, when you stopped and gave to the one who appeared to have nothing, you were not giving away something you needed. You were making a deposit into the one account that does not lose value and does not default. You lent to me, and I do not borrow without returning. I do not receive without giving back. I do not carry a debt to someone who gave to me in the form of giving to the one who appeared to have nothing, without settling that debt in a way that is consistent with what I am capable of releasing. The people who kept moving that day are not being punished, but they are not receiving what you are about to receive either, because they did not give what you gave, and what you gave is what produced the response that is now moving in the direction of your life type they passed by. I stayed in the comments. Sow a seed for the one who gave in a moment when everyone around them was calculating, who stayed when others moved on, who offered something to the one who appeared to have nothing and did not wait to see what the return would be before offering it. Visit the link in the description below or scan the QR code on your screen. Sow it as a declaration that the one who gives to the least gives to God, and God's response is always worth the giving. My child, I want to tell you now about how I respond to what was given, because the return on what you gave does not operate through the same logic that the visible world uses to process generosity. In the visible world, generosity produces returns through the mechanisms of human relationship. You give to a person, and that person gives back to you, or does not. And the outcome is determined by the character and the capacity of the person you gave to. That is one economy. It is real, but it is not the economy that your act of kindness entered into. What you gave entered into a different economy entirely. It entered into the economy described by the principle in Matthew 25, where what is given to the least is given to me, and where I am the one who determines the return. And the return I release in response to what was given to me does not come through the mechanism of the person you helped giving something back to you. It comes through every resource, every connection, every arrangement, every door, every provision that I have access to, which means the ceiling on what can come back to you is not determined by the capacity of the person you gave to. It is determined by my capacity, and my capacity is not limited by what the visible situation appeared to offer when you stopped to help. My child, I also want to address something that the people who watched you give in that season said about the giving, because there were people who noticed your generosity, not with admiration but with something closer to dismissal, who watched you extend what you had toward people who appeared to have nothing and drew conclusions about what that meant. Some of them said you were naive, that kindness without strategy was a luxury you could not afford in the world you were living in, that the people you were helping were taking advantage of what you offered because you were too willing to offer it, that you needed to be smarter about where you directed your energy, that the generosity you were practicing was leaving you with less while giving others more, and that the math of it did not favor you. Some of them took a different position and said nothing out loud but adjusted how they treated you based on what they decided your giving said about your sophistication. They read uncalculated generosity as innocence that had not yet been educated by sufficient experience of disappointment. They saw purity of motive as immaturity that would eventually be corrected by the world into something more guarded and more strategic. They were waiting for you to grow out of it. I want to tell you what is about to happen to all of those assessments. They are about to be corrected by what arrives in your life in response to what you gave, not by your argument, not by your defense of the generosity you practiced, by the visible consequence of the giving that they called naive. The return that I am releasing into your life is not a subtle shift. It will not be something that requires careful explanation to distinguish from the normal course of events. It will be unmistakable in a way that makes its own statement about the wisdom of the giving that preceded it. The people who called you naive will not be able to dismiss what they see as unrelated to the kindness they witnessed. The connection will be visible, and the visibility of the connection is part of what I am releasing, not as revenge on those who misread the giving, but as the natural consequence of the principle that the generosity practiced toward the least returns through me in a way that is proportional to my capacity, and that return cannot be hidden or explained away by the categories the people who dismissed it were using. I want to be specific about what this means for what is coming in your life, not specific in the way of a schedule or a predicted sequence of events, specific about the quality of what comes back. What returns to you will carry the fingerprints of what I prepared, rather than the fingerprints of what you produced through your own effort. You will recognize it because it will arrive in a way you did not arrange, a connection you did not manufacture, an opening you did not engineer, a recognition that comes from a direction you were not watching. These are not coincidences. They are the structural consequence of what you set in motion when you gave to the one who appeared to have nothing without knowing that giving to that person was giving to me. The mechanism that produces what is coming to you is not human. It is the mechanism that operates when someone deposits something real into my economy and I release the corresponding return. That return is in motion. It has been in motion since the moment you walked away from the encounter without knowing what you had done, and it is moving toward the specific dimensions of your life that your giving spoke about without you knowing it was speaking. If you feel a settling in your chest right now, a quiet recognition rather than an emotion, that is the spirit of what I am describing making contact with the spirit of what you already know to be true. You have known that what you gave in that season was not wasted. You have known that the kindness you offered when no one was watching was not lost. You have carried that knowing without proof. I am giving you the proof now, not as a promise about a future that has not arrived yet, but as a confirmation of what the spiritual economy has already processed and what is already on its way back to you. Type "I felt it" shift in the comments, my child. I want to speak about what the purity of unobserved giving produces in the person who practices it. Because what you did in that encounter did not only initiate a return from the spiritual economy, it produced something in you. There is a dimension of authority that grows in the person who develops the habit of giving when no one is watching, in the direction of the one who has nothing to give back, without waiting to understand what the giving will produce. That authority does not come from knowing the right things or being in the right rooms or being connected to the right people. It comes from being the kind of person whose giving is not conditional on the visibility of the return, from being someone whose hands are trained to open without first calculating whether opening makes sense. That training produces something in the interior that carries weight in the spiritual realm. It produces the credibility of someone whose generosity is not performance, and that credibility changes how the spiritual realm responds to what you carry. When you speak into a situation now, something responds that did not respond at the same level before the season in which you practiced unobserved giving. When you declare something now, the declaration carries the weight of someone who gave without condition. That weight is not manufactured. It is built through the specific practice of extending your hand toward the one who cannot give back, without knowing that anyone is watching, and discovering over and over again that I was watching the entire time. As it is written in Galatians 6-9, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." My child, the proper time is not indefinitely postponed. It has a terminus. It has an arrival. And what I want you to understand about the proper time is that it is not determined by how much time has passed since the giving. It is determined by when the harvest that was planted by the giving has reached the maturity that makes it ready to be released. A harvest that is not ready cannot be forced into readiness by effort or impatience. But a harvest that is ready does not stay in the ground past the proper time. What was planted by what you gave is ready. The proper time is not something you are still waiting to approach. You are standing at it. The harvest has matured into what the planting was always producing, and the one who does not give up receives it at the proper time. You did not give up. You are still here. The harvest is here too. Type "I was not performing" in the comments, my child. There is something else I want you to understand about the dimension of authority that the purity of your giving produced, because there is a specific kind of spiritual weight that belongs to the person whose giving has never been performed, who has never given in a way that was shaped by who was watching, whose generosity is identical whether there is an audience or not, because it does not draw its motivation from the approval of an audience. That consistency, that sameness of the giving regardless of who is present, is what I look for in the person I am preparing to carry something significant into the world. Because what I release into the life of that person will also be carried without an audience for a season. What I am building through them will also be worked on in the quiet before it becomes visible in the public. And I need someone whose faithfulness does not require visibility to stay consistent. Someone who worked when no one was watching. Someone who gave when no one was counting. Someone who practiced the specific discipline of doing the same thing in private that they would do in public, because the motivation for the doing was not the public, but the conviction that the doing was right. My child, I have been watching you practice that discipline in the giving that no one saw, in the generosity that produced no visible return and no social acknowledgement, and no confirmation from any external source that what you were doing was the right thing to do, in the consistency of your open hand toward the one who had nothing to give back. You were being trained for something. You did not know it was training, but I was using the practice of unobserved giving to build in you the specific quality of character that what is coming requires you to have. The capacity to carry something significant without the carrying, requiring constant external validation to continue. That capacity is now in place, and what is coming will find in you someone who can hold it the same way you held the giving, with equal steadiness whether the audience is present or not. My child, I also want to speak to you about the specific nature of the one you helped, because I said earlier that they were not who they appeared to be, and I want to explain what I mean by that more fully. What I mean is not primarily that they were carrying hidden status in the visible world. What I mean is that in the spiritual realm, every person I place in your path carries something that is not legible from the outside. Every encounter I arrange is layered in a way that the visible surface of the encounter does not fully communicate. The person who appeared to need what you had to offer was carrying a weight in the spiritual realm that your act of kindness addressed at a level deeper than the surface need you responded to. When you gave what you gave, you were not only meeting the need that was visible, you were participating in something I was doing in that person's interior that had nothing to do with the visible level of what they needed. You were the moment of proof that what they had been told was not true. That people do not only stop for people who have something to offer, that kindness that carries no agenda still exists, that there is still a person somewhere whose hands open toward the one who has nothing, because that is what hands built by genuine love do when they encounter need. For that person, in that moment, you were proof. And proof of that kind, given to someone who had stopped believing it was possible, does something in the spiritual realm that persists long after the moment has passed. It plants a seed in the interior of the recipient that cannot be unplanted by subsequent disappointment. The moment of genuine, unperformed, uncalculated kindness stays. It haunts in the way that truth haunts, by being impossible to fully explain away no matter how much the rational mind tries. That seed is what I placed in that encounter for them. What I placed in the encounter for you is a different thing entirely. What I placed in the encounter for you is the return that belongs to someone who gave to me when they did not know they were giving to me, and the return belongs to you in full. Type I receive what was stored in the comments. My child, I want to speak now about who you are in the deepest sense. Underneath the season you have been in and underneath the questions that the season has produced about whether what you carry is enough and whether where you are going is real, and whether the giving you have been doing, the quiet, is registered anywhere that matters. I want to address those questions directly. What you carry is enough. It is more than enough. It is the specific thing that qualifies you for what is coming, because what is coming requires exactly the quality you have been developing through, exactly the practice you have been engaged in, the giving without audience, the kindness extended in the direction of the one who cannot give back, the choice to open the hand when the calculation said to keep it closed. As it is written in Isaiah 58:10, if you spend yourselves in behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like the noonday. My child, that is not a poetic description. It is a structural promise about what happens in the life of someone who consistently spends themselves in behalf of the one who needs what they have to offer. The light rises. The darkness does not consume it. The night does not stay night. The spending that looked like loss from the outside was building something on the inside that is now ready to become visible. And what becomes visible when the proper time arrives will not look like something that gradually improved over time. It will look like what happens when light rises in a place that has been dark. Not a slow brightening, a revelation, my child. I also want to speak to you about what it has cost you to be the person who gives the way you give, because there is a real cost to practicing unobserved generosity in a world that has largely organized itself around visible return. You have paid that cost in ways that were quiet and consistent. There were seasons when you gave to people who did not acknowledge what they received, who received your time, your energy, your attention, your care, and moved on without registering that something valuable had been given, who treated what you offered as something that was simply available, rather than something that came at a cost to the one offering it. There were moments when you gave to people who later positioned themselves against you, who received the generosity of your open hand and then decided that your openness made you available for a different kind of taking, who interpreted your willingness to give as evidence that you could be taken from without consequence. Each of those moments had a cost, a small depletion of something in the interior that the visible dimension has no name for, but that the spiritual realm registers clearly every time you gave and received nothing back, including the times when what came back was actively negative. Something was being recorded. Not as a complaint, not as a debt that someone else owed you, as a credit that belongs to you in the economy where I am the one who holds the ledger. And I want you to know that every moment of that cost has been accounted for. Every unacknowledged act, every giving that was followed by nothing or by a taking, every choice to remain open when the visible evidence was building a case for closing. All of it is in the accounting, and the accounting is accurate, and what is coming back to you reflects the accuracy of that accounting in full. I want you to understand something about the way what is coming will arrive. It will not arrive through the mechanism of you finally figuring out the right strategy. It will not arrive because you finally said the right thing to the right person in the right room. It will arrive the way harvest arrives in the life of someone who planted and waited and did not stop planting even during the waiting. Not because of the planting alone, but because I am the one who causes the growth. As it is written in 1 Corinthians 3-7, neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who makes things grow. The planting you did was real. The watering you did through continued faithfulness was real. But what makes it grow is me, and I am making it grow now. What is about to become visible in your life was not produced by your cleverness, or your strategy, or your connections. It was produced by the growth that I cause in the ground, prepared by the giving that you practiced when no one was watching. Type "I am the least of these two" in the comments. Sow a seed before the closing prayer for the one who has been spending themselves in behalf of others in quiet seasons without visible return, who has been planting without seeing the harvest, who gave to the one who appeared to have nothing without knowing they were giving to me. Visit the link in the description below or scan the QR code on your screen. Sow it for them as a declaration that the light is rising, that the proper time is here, and that the harvest does not stay in the ground past the moment I have appointed for it to come up. My child, let me close with what I most need you to carry from this word. The encounter you had was not random. The person you helped was not placed in your path by accident. I arranged the encounter for reasons that belong to both of you. What I arranged for them was a moment of proof that genuine kindness still exists without agenda. What I arranged for you was an entry into the economy of Matthew 25, where giving to the least is giving to me, and where I determine the return. Both of those things happened, both of those things are real, and the consequences of both of those things are now moving in the direction they were always going to move once the seed was planted. You could not have stopped this by walking away differently after the encounter. You could not have accelerated it by doing something additional. The planting was the act. The growth is what I do. The harvest is what arrives when the growth is complete, and the growth is complete. The harvest is what comes next. As it is written in Luke 6:38, "Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you, my child." The measure you used was the measure of someone who gave without counting, who helped without an audience, who extended kindness to the one who appeared to have nothing and found out that giving to that person was giving to me. The measure I use in return is proportional to my capacity, not to the visible size of what you gave, and what is being measured back to you is running over. Heavenly Father, we come before you now over the chosen one who gave in the quiet, who helped when no one was watching, who extended kindness to the one who appeared to have nothing and did not know that the moment they were participating in was a moment you had arranged with the full attention of the one who arranges everything. We receive now the truth that what was given to the least was given to you, that the examination of motive came back clean, that the return belongs to the one who gave without condition. We release the questions that the quiet season produced about whether the giving was registered anywhere that matters. It was registered. You registered it, You received it as given to you, and you are releasing the corresponding return in a way that is proportional to your capacity, rather than proportional to the visible size of the moment. Let the harvest that was planted arrive in the way harvest arrives, suddenly visible after what felt like a long underground season. Let the light that was promised rise in the places where the darkness has been longest. Let the door that belongs to the person who practiced unobserved faithfulness open without requiring them to force it. In the name of the one who sees every unobserved moment and accounts for it in the economy that does not lose track of a single act of genuine giving. Amen. My child, I want you to know that the prayer that was just spoken over you was received the moment the first word of it was spoken, not held in a queue, not processed in sequence with the prayers of others ahead of you, received directly by the one who arranged the encounter that started this sequence of events, and who has been tracking every moment of the season that preceded this word, the one who knows the full cost of the giving you practiced in the quiet, and who is the one responsible for returning it in a way that is consistent with what I am capable of releasing in response to genuine, unperformed, uncalculated generosity given to the least without knowing the giving was going to me, my child. If this word landed on the place in you that has been wondering whether your kindness in the quiet is being seen at all, send this to the one person you know who is giving without return right now, who is practicing a generosity that no one is applauding, who needs to hear that what they are giving to the least, they are giving to me, and that I do not receive without responding. Let them know the return is not missing. It is in motion. God bless you, beloved.